Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen to the everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. The doctor saving lives at your local hospital, the war veteran down the street who risked his lives for our freedom, the police officers and firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling, but there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored. The entrepreneur, the creator, the producer, the ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what? I can fix that. I can help people, and I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world, others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks of the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, of course. I'm on the line with Allan Langer. Allan, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I am. We had a bit of trouble getting our interview started today, but that's okay. So, Allan, let me just do a quick intro for you, and then we'll get right into this show. You are Allan Langer. You're a speaker, sales coach, author, and sales consultant. You're the author of The 7 Secrets to Selling More by Selling Less. You spent nearly 2 successful decades in sales, consumer sales, in-home selling, B2B sales, business development, and fundraising. And basically, you realized that nobody likes to be pitched and closed. So you got into the sales coaching business, which leads us, I think, really to the first part of the interview here, which is, what are you known for today? What is it that people come to you to learn and figure out and, better themselves with?
Well, what I've learned is over the years, the sales pitch is trained for a reason. It's there to help reps make sales and follow the protocol of the company. But customers today, and as I went along in sales, they don't want the sales pitch. So people come to me and they want to know how I actually am successful in selling without actually following the ABC sales pitch that most reps are trained.
Always be closing.
Always be closing, and also in reference to, okay, I have to follow the script. I have to go, all right, I got to do this, then this, then this. I'm not going to listen to the customer. I'm just going to follow the steps that they taught me. And most of the time, the customer doesn't want to hear the first 7 steps. They may be only interested in step 9. So you have to figure that out as a sales rep when you're in front of a customer, what exactly that they want to hear.
Yeah, so what you've sort of become known for is helping people master that, right? Be better at learning to hear their customers and sell the way customers want to be sold.
Correct. And really change the mindset. Everyone's mindset in training wise, and even when you get into sales, the mindset is, I need to make a sale. I'm meeting this person to make a sale. And that's not true. You're actually meeting that person to help them solve their problems. Yeah. And if you do that and forget about the sale end of it, you'll be much more successful.
Yeah, it's something I found a lot in my business as well, is that if you realize that sales is actually I think it's probably the one of the highest mind jobs there is, right? Because what you're doing essentially is you're finding people who have a problem and connecting them with solutions. You're like a solutions connector. And if you start thinking of sales that way, then it's a lot easier to do, because you're not looking to sell someone, you're looking to help them solve a problem. And that may or may not be your product or service, right? And
exactly.
Yeah. So sometimes the best sale is the one you don't make.
Yeah, so I'm 100%. And I have a chapter in my book called The Helping Percentage, because I always hated the term closing percentage, or I closed the customer. It always sounded very negative and like, you conquered the customer.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's adversarial almost. So I put in my book that every sales organization should change that term to the helping percentage. And how many people did you help today, rather than how many people did you close today?
Absolutely.
It's just a mindset thing, really.
Yeah. So let's dive right into the actual the rest of the stuff here. Let's talk about your origin story. Right? We talk. Every hero has an origin story. It's where you started to realize that you were different. That maybe you had superpowers and maybe you could use them to help other people. Where did you start to develop or discover the value that you could bring people, this whole entrepreneurial journey that you're on?
It's an interesting story because I had my first professional career was in college athletics. Actually, I was hired right out of college to do statistics. It was called sports information. I did the statistics. Then I worked my way into marketing and then fundraising for college athletics. Actually, was at Columbia University in New York City for the last 3 years of my career there. Great job, a lot of fun. People were envious because I was on the sidelines all the time, running football events and basketball events. But burned out after 15 years. You're working 80 or 90 hours a week. So I was very good at what I did. Won a lot of national awards, especially for my marketing and fundraising. So one day I'm chatting with a buddy of mine. We're having dinner, and I was really having thoughts about what I should be doing next. And he said to me, "Why don't you get into sales?" And I said, "Sales?" I said, "Who the heck wants to get into sales?" Because it's such a taboo word. And I said, I don't know how to be a salesman." And he laughed at me. He said, "Don't you fundraise for a living? Don't you sell season tickets? Don't you call newspapers and try to get stories about athletes?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you're selling every day. You just don't even know it." So it really got me thinking, and I gave a month's notice the next day actually, and that's how I got into sales. So about, I don't know, 6 weeks later, I was hired by this general contractor to do his business development. And then from there, I went on to in-home sales and some B2B stuff. And that's where I really started to realize that not only am I good at this, but, you know, I like helping people solve their problems. And I like kind of teaching what I can do because I was the number one sales rep for many, many years at Anderson Windows. And it was funny. My direct boss always said to me, what you do can't be trained. You're just a feel salesperson. You just have a great feel for it." And I said, "I disagree." I said, "I think everything I do can be trained." And that's kind of why I wrote the book, actually.
Because someone told you you couldn't.
Someone told me I couldn't.
I like it. I like it. That's how I do most of the things in my life. Someone says you can't do that. Watch me do it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So my curiosity on that is, did you learn over the course of your sales career that it doesn't matter what you're selling, that your skills could be applied regardless of what you were plugging into the actual sales process?
Yeah. So it's funny. I can go back and feel or almost look at the roadmap of, you join an organization, they send you to the training class, and both organizations that I went to these official training classes, they were both week-long training classes, and you learn the pitch. You learn, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. Learn about the product, and then this is how I sell the product, and then this is how you handle objections, and this is how you do all these little sales techniques that they train you. And as I got out of those training, now I'm young. I mean, I don't know anything about sales, technically, the technical parts of sales. So I went into meeting people and I was following that pitch. I was following that routine. And I was realizing that it only worked about 30% of the time, maybe less.
Mm-hmm.
And it started to dawn on me that most sales organizations consider a 30% closing rate successful. Like, you have a 30% closing rate, you're a good rep, you're fine. This is what we want. But I look at it from the other side of the glass. If I meet 100 people and 70 of them tell me no, I think there's something wrong. Like, to me, that's not even close to successful. So how can you meet 100 people and 70 of them say that they don't want your product? Something's wrong with that. So that's when I started thinking differently. I said, I really got to start listening to customers. And, if this one doesn't want to know about the glass package, well, then I'm not going to tell them about it. If they just want to know the color of the window and how it's going to keep their house warm, and that's going to help them, and they're comfortable with me, that's all they need to know. And that's what I started really saying, wow, this is, I have something here. And then I really started to dig into the specifics of what I do with customers.
So what was your close ratio at the window thing if it wasn't 30%?
I always hovered right around 60.
That's crazy because I know in the marketing and sales world where we do a lot of training and teaching on that, we tell people that if in almost every situation, you're never going to have a greater than 50% close rate. So most of the people you interact with are going to say no to you, right? Because that's the reality of sales and marketing for most people. So to
Right.
have someone coming and saying, hey, in your case, most of the people I talk to say yes, which is
Exactly.
which is crazy. So to push it on, we talk about your superpowers, right? And what is it that you do or build or offer this world that helps solve problems for people, right? The things you use to slay this world's villains. Sounds to me like you have a superpower in getting people to say yes. But what would you say your superpower is?
I think my superpower is to getting people to be comfortable with me. Saying yes is
A result.
I never go into a sales situation anymore wanting to make a sale. If sales is the ultimate culmination of our meeting, that's great. If they buy the product, that's great, because then I know that they trust me and this product is going to help them.
Mm.
But if I go in there and I'm like, oh my God, I better, I'm 0 for my last 5, I better make this sale. The customer is gone. You're thinking about yourself, and they smell that immediately. You can never think about yourself in sales ever, 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 ever. And so I think my superpower is like when I get the customer feedbacks and the testimonials and stuff, it's always about Allan made me feel really comfortable. He wasn't like a salesman. I hear that all the time. He wasn't like a typical salesman. And that's unfortunate because the world is full of typical salespeople. And that's why people don't want to meet with salespeople. They don't want the sales pitch. They don't want that feeling of being uncomfortable.
That whole feeling of being uncomfortable, actually, it's the same way I approach sales as well, where I'll get on the phone with someone and I'm like, I'll start that off with the conversation where like my goal here is not to sell you my products or programs, right? My goal is to find
That's
out
perfect.
what it is you need help with. And if there's a great
Right.
fit, great. If not, like I've got lots of connections I can point you in the right direction. So like let's just sit down and talk through like what it is that you need. Um, and people appreciate that. They appreciate that
100%.
you're not there to quote unquote sell them. And when you really get down to it, you realize that that is sales, right? That's the way sales should be. And
Correct.
this thing that everyone else calls sales is more like, I don't know, something else. It needs a different name. Abuse, maybe.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because when I was thinking about doing the book and kind of organizing things, the one thing in the back of my mind has always been, why don't people like to meet with salespeople? Like, is that just me thinking that? Like, do people really don't want to meet with salespeople? So before I wrote the book, I actually did an unofficial experiment. For 2 weeks, I asked everybody I met, and no matter who it was, whether I knew them or not, this is the same question. Do you like meeting with a salesperson? And it turned out I asked 263 people in a 2 week period, and every single one of them, 100% said no. So 100% of people that I spoke to in 2 weeks said they do not like to talk to a salesperson. So I came up with, in my book, I came up with it, I called it a phobia. It's not officially a phobia, but the fear of talking to a salesperson, I called it rip the trustophobia. It's a kind of a made up term in my book that, people are not born with this. It just comes from being ripped off and being made to feel like you were not comfortable with when you were purchasing something, and it just grows and it stays in your body. And then all of a sudden, when you're an adult, you don't ever want to meet with a salesperson. You walk into the mattress store and you hide in the corner because you don't want the guy to come over to you. And obviously the car salesman stuff, and even walking into a store, you automatically blurt out, "I'm just looking," even though you may need help finding something. So it's just that innate fear of being ripped off and being felt uncomfortable, being to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a like a deep problem because sales is what literally makes the world go round, right? So
Literally.
yeah, it makes the world go round in like every industry there is. So without the sale, there's nothing. Like there's no like if you think about all the things in your
Right.
house that you bought everything we're using today, someone sold it to you somewhere. So
Right.
sales is just
Exactly.
such a fundamental part of commerce that to have most adults, in your case, you said you asked 100, 260 people and 100% of them said they don't like it. There's like a fundamental problem with the way
It's crazy.
probably salespeople are approaching sales.
Right. So that's why I say in this book, you will become the salesperson that people actually want to talk to. you won't be lumped into the typical, pool of, the snakeskin oil, snake oil salesman
Yeah. So
persona.
in the sales realm, you don't get to make that like distinction until after you've met with the customer. You got any like strategies to help alleviate that like fear before you actually get in the room with the customer?
Well, what you do on the phone is an excellent way to start any sales conversation. Basically saying, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to help you. I start every conversation I have had for the last 7 years. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. My name is Allan. Just so you know, you're not going to get a dog and pony sales show from me. I'm just here to find out what your problems are and see if I can help you. Does that sound okay? And you almost every single time you see this wash of relief come over their faces because they're all geared up for the sales presentation. They're all geared up to be pressured to buy something. And when you say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not what I do. Let's figure out how I can help you. That right there pulls the pin out of the pressure balloon and makes them relax a little bit. So that's a good way to start any type of sales situation.
So we actually do something very similar in because we use webinars and micro webinars and sales videos online for marketing purposes to drive sales calls. And we say the same kind of things to even get someone to get on the phone with us, where we'll say, hey, we want to actually help you solve a problem, and we're gonna like this is what the call is gonna actually how it's gonna go, right? We're gonna get on, find out where you are, where you want to be, help you build a plan to get there, and if our products or services make sense for you, we might offer them. But the point of the call is not to close a sale. The point of the call is to help you see where you are and where you want to get to, right? So we use language like that to actually get people to even raise their hand and say, yeah, I'd like to have a sales call.
Yeah, and that differentiates you from 80% of everyone else who's out there. I mean, think about, you're doing stuff online. Think about that realm of how many times people are inundated, especially professionals like you and me, when we're on Facebook or Instagram. Every third post is a different ad of someone who's going to help your business do something. So how do you differentiate yourself to get that person to actually be interested there?
Absolutely.
That's a good way to do it.
So if your superpower is connecting with people, the other side of your superpower is your fatal flaw. So talk about this on all of our shows. Superman has his kryptonite. Batman's not actually super, right? If you had to think through one of your fatal flaws, what would you say it is, and how have you you sort of combated it or improved upon it over the years?
My fatal flaw, and I've improved on this greatly, was always a couple things, and they go hand in hand. It was constantly working to my entire sales career has been commission only. So that's a different aspect of stress when you have a family and stuff like that. So I was always constantly working to generate my appointments and to make sure that I always was able to put food on the table to a fault. Like I was working too much, but I also fell into the sales trap of being negative. So many sales reps complain about the leads. They complain about how many phone calls they have to make. They complain about this, or they didn't make enough money. They didn't make the sale, and it's all a constant avalanche of negativity. And all that stuff is sent out to the universe. And you're not going to get anything positive back when all you're thinking about is negative things. So the year I wrote my book, which was 2018, I made a conscious decision to change all that. And I took every morning off the entire year. Can you still hear me? I got a little error there.
Yeah, I can hear you.
You still hear me? Okay. Okay. So I made a conscious decision. I took every morning off for the year. And that's when I sat down every morning and I worked on writing my book. And I stopped being negative. I stopped thinking negative thoughts. Everything I was doing was going toward a positive result of writing my book and knowing I was in my happy place, because writing is my happy place. And it was incredibly eye-opening how many positive things came back to me once I did that. And for example, there's a certain amount of appointments we run every single year, and there's 3 appointment slots a day. So I called my boss in the middle of January and says, I'm taking every morning off for the entire year. And obviously he wasn't too happy about that, but he supported me, and it was literally 30% less appointments. Now, and again, keep in mind it's commission only sales. So and at the end of the year, I ran 165 less appointments than I did the year before, but I sold $500,000 more in revenue. And I attribute that to a better mindset, a positive mindset, and a less is more attitude of not constantly focusing on the sale, but constantly focusing on helping people and staying positive. And I'm living proof that it works. And the book got done, and it's on Amazon, and it's published, and now I'm here, and I'm ready to phase myself out of day-to-day selling and get into the realm of speaking and coaching and sales consulting. So
Yeah, so that's where you get the whole idea that selling more by selling less comes from.
correct,
Yeah,
exactly right.
real world experience. That's awesome. So by sort of combating that negativity flaw and replacing it with positivity, and just like it's a almost like a stress reduction, right? Because I know I had the same thing going in my life. I remember, if I go back 4 or 5 years, I was working 18 hours a day every day, like
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how, basically working my ass off to make sure we put food on the table with my own agency and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I mean, like there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I say you have to, you know, everyone has to go through their stage where they just have to, excuse the language, eat the shit, right? They have to put in the hard work and
Oh
learn the
yeah, I
skills.
mean,
And
yeah, there's nothing wrong with hard work, that's for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And you go through there, but you realize at some point that once you've mastered your skill, that it doesn't require nearly as much of your effort to get significantly greater results. Um, right?
Right.
You can reduce your time input, and you're much happier, and then you start getting better results all the way through. So I've seen that happen in my own life as
Mm-hmm.
well, which is really interesting. So
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I'm like, what is your happy place? What do you love to do? And not only professionally, but personally. And for me, it's always been writing. So, but I hadn't written in years. I mean, I would write a short story every now and then, but I was always selling. I was always working. And scheduling that time to do your happy thing, or to do the thing that makes you happy, is going to change your life. It really will. You need to set aside, don't be afraid to set aside that time, because if you're doing what you like and then you change your attitude to a positive attitude, you're going to get things back twice as abundant as you about previous.
yeah,
I'm
and
absolutely 1000%.
I like that you talked about
Sure.
scheduling it too, right? You're actually talking about putting that into your day,
Absolutely.
where you're saying this is my I've been talking about it as giving yourself permission to play, right? And
Correct.
if you
Yep.
schedule it into your calendar and say this is the time where I get to go and do me, right? And it's different for everyone. Like for me, it's
Mm-hmm.
playing with my kids and going kayaking and stuff like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you're putting
Yep.
that into the calendar. And I think one of the things that I've found, at least, is if I put it in the calendar and say that's what this time is for, then when I'm actually in that, I'm not thinking about all the things I should be doing, right? Because I've given myself permission to just be there
Right.
and be present with myself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing, because here's another example. So, obviously with in-home selling, and now you're building a whole list of customers. So I would be contacted by customers all the time, whether it's with a referral, or I've got a problem, or something doesn't work, I have to set up a service. So that's what I would be spending my mornings doing. But once I started writing and focusing on my book, those calls remarkably almost disappeared. Like, I would go a whole week without hearing from a customer, because most of the time when a customer is going to call you, it's usually not good news. They're not calling you just to say hello. Um, but once all that positivity started, I started putting that out there. I would be writing, and everything would be going great in selling and at work, and I wouldn't have to worry about any issues, or what they say, putting out fires. So then the book is finished. It took me 5 months to write the book. Now it's in the editing stages. So now I'm done. Now I still have my mornings off, and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do now? And the 2 weeks I didn't write, I got the most calls from customers I had all year. And my editor, she told me, she's like, I was saying, like, what's going on? I said, I'm all of a sudden I'm inundated with all of these calls from work and everybody's complaining and blah, blah, blah. She goes, you're not writing. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? She goes, just write, trust me. So I just decided to write a short story and the calls went away again. So it's such a powerful thing where you're doing what you want to do. Your energy changes so much that you start bringing that stuff back to yourself.
Absolutely. So it's a vital part of really being successful is understanding how to have that positive energy in your life every day. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk a little bit about your common enemy, right? So specifically in
About my what?
your common enemy. So I want to talk a
My
little bit.
common enemy?
Yeah, common enemy, which is
Okay.
in reference to your sales coaching and sales training that you do now. When you work with a salesperson, if you could remove one thing from their life, from their mindset, from their thinking, and it would immediately change the results they were getting, what would that thing be?
It would be what I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, that they need to change the mindset from selling someone to helping someone. They need to make that switch. It's I'm here to help you, Mr. Smith. I'm not here to sell you. That small switch, that small mindset is enormous for a salesperson, because the second you do that, now it's all about the customer and it's not about you. If you don't worry about whether or not you make the sale, if that's not in your mind at all, you're going to come across much more relaxed. You're going to come across much more as a person who wants to help the customer. And sorry, I'm getting texts in the middle of this. And that's in the very beginning of my book, is like, if you're going to do anything at all from this book, help someone, don't sell them. And I guarantee you your sales will increase quite a bit.
So for someone who is, because I've been in this position, for someone who is thinking, okay, I hear you that I need to help people, but I really need to make these sales,
Mm-hmm.
because if I don't, I'm not going to feed my kids today, right? Like how do they make
Mm-hmm.
that mental shift when they're
It's
sitting in those situations?
it's not easy. I mean, it is because you they've spent so much time, like I did, with the stress of, I need to make the sale because I need to feed my family. But you have to, at some point, take that leap of faith and say, well, this isn't working right now. Yes, I'm closing 30% of my customers and I'm making this amount of money. But if you really want to make money and you really want to be happy with what you're doing, because that's the other thing in sales, is I also polled a bunch of salespeople and I asked them, do you actually like selling? And majority of them said, yeah, they kind of like selling more from a meeting people standpoint, but they hated doing the sales pitch. So you got, on one hand, you got people who don't want to meet with salespeople. On the other hand, you got salespeople who don't like doing a sales pitch. It's a wonder anything is sold at all. And I've told that exact question I had a couple of weeks ago with a rep I was training, and she said to me, she goes, but I need to make sales. I can't just trust that helping someone is going to do it. I said, you're going to need to trust it, because if you don't, you're just going to stay in the same position you are right now. You have to trust that changing that mindset to helping people will increase your sales. And then once it starts to happen, once you make a sale or two, you still start feeling more confident in doing it. And then it just snowballs exponentially from there.
Yeah, and I think, like, just thinking about it a little bit, if people who are being sold don't like being sold, and salespeople don't like giving the sales pitch, but yet 30% of people still buy, the reality is that the
Right.
problems people are facing are big enough to overcome their dislike of sales and the salesperson dislike of giving the sales pitch, which means if you remove all of that, the problem is still there, right? And they still want it
Yes.
solved. So
Correct.
if you just focus on that they have a problem and you have a solution, like, you've removed all the
Mm-hmm.
friction. So naturally your sales are going to go up.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's when the friction is gone, people feel more comfortable. I remember very vividly, my very first sales job was with a sunroom company years and years and years ago. And the old guy who owned it, he was a great guy. He was an old time sales rep kind of briefcase carrying guy, but he also was very affable and likable. And he said to me once, he goes, out of 10 people you meet, 2 of them will always buy and 2 of them will never buy. He goes, guaranteed, what you do for me is going to determine your success in sales. And he's kind of right. You can go and I'm sure you experience this, you totally foobar your presentation, you screw up, and they still buy from you because they just need the product. Mm-hmm. And then you do the best presentation in the world. It's Academy Award, worthy, and they don't buy anyway. So you're meeting those type of people, but the 6 in the middle, the ones who need to feel comfortable with you, need to feel comfortable with the product, but don't know who to go to, are going to choose you over the person that's giving the sales pitch. And that's where if you sell 4 of those 6, now you're 6 out of 10 and you're a rock star.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it just completely changes the mathematics of the game too, because now you're playing a different game than other people are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've found that in pretty much every industry I've ever been in, that you have to play a different game than most people are playing if you want to succeed. Like even when I went to try getting a high level marketing position, I had it was working to get a job, and which is really sales, right? People don't realize that, putting out a job interview and doing all that kind of stuff, you're selling yourself. And just approached it completely differently than most people do, and beat out 250 other people for the position, right? Because you play a different game. And you went to the job interview with the same mindset, is like, hey, here's the problem you have in this space, and here's the solutions I have for you, right? And we didn't even do this normal interview game, like what's your something that you're good at or whatever. I don't even know how the interview things go, but they ask all these stupid questions that aren't relevant. So I remember actually going in an interview and being like, I don't want to do all of that. What I want to do is I want to talk about the problems you have and the solutions I have for them. And we spent an hour and a half talking about all those things. They hired me over 250 other people, right? Because you play a different game.
Yep.
And it just,
wow, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it just changes the way things
great
work.
Point.
So I would say you're a driving force, right? Just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index all the world's information. What is your mission? What is it that you fight for?
Okay. Well, I think now at this point, when I really decided to write a book, my mission is to get rid of rip the trustophobia. I want the world to start trusting salespeople again. I want them to feel comfortable with, you know what, I got to go buy a stereo today, and I really want to talk to the sales rep because I know that guy in that store listens to me. He helps me out. I mean, think about how many times in your life you've actually met a salesperson that you've liked and they've helped you and you didn't feel, any pressure. How many times do you recommend, you fall over people trying to send people to that person because he or she is so different. It's the same with anyone, recommendations come from people that you like, but especially in a sales situation, like if you ever met a car salesman that you actually liked, oh my God, you're telling everyone you know to go to that car salesman because you don't want them to get ripped off by anybody else. So I would say my mission is to make as many salespeople that type of salesperson going forward in my trainings and my teachings, because I want people to like salespeople again. I really do. It's a great profession. I think it's a noble profession. And like you said, it makes the world go round. And it's just unfortunate that the entire sales training history has been to coerce customers and to follow a pitch and sell at all costs.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like when you think about it from like the business standpoint, of course that's how you're going to train, right? You're going to train people to get the sale because that's what the bottom line is about.
Well, of course, and I understand that. Yeah, that's the bottom line, right?
Yeah, so like, of course, that's the way it goes.
But if there's a way to, yeah, I mean, so I'm not saying to eliminate the sales pitch. Everyone should go through the training process that the company has. But then once you have the training process, then you take the techniques that I have to distill yourself from the salesperson that they're training you to be. And that combination will make you, I guarantee it will make you one of the top sales reps in the country because you're not following what everyone else is doing, word and sentence by sentence.
Absolutely. So let's move forward a little bit and talk about your hero's tool belt. So, we talk, maybe you have a big magical hammer like Thor, or maybe you have a cool bulletproof vest like your neighborhood police officer, or maybe you just really love the way Evernote helps you organize your thoughts. Do you have a set of tools you use that really help you in your either preparing for sales or helping teach people sales, or, that really just help you accomplish your goal on a daily basis for doing what you do?
Well, I mean, the seven secrets are part of my tool belt when I'm meeting with someone, but the preparation, I think, comes from a work ethic standpoint, but also knowing when to say, oh, okay, I'm done for today. I did this. I did my 2 hours worth of work. If I keep going, it's not going to be very productive, or it could be, the opposite of that. So I would say my work ethic is in my tool belt. My seven secrets. A meeting with a customer, absolutely. And I also think one of the things that I'm proud of about myself is how I can adjust and think on my feet. I mean, you need to be that way. You need to have that type of personality when you're in sales anyway. But if you can figure out how to adjust to situations in front of you quickly, like body language, for example. I have a whole chapter on body language. If you're noticing someone's doing something with regard to their how they just held their hands, or what they did they scratched the back of their neck, or they did something with their eyebrows, those subtle hints, you need to have that type of technique in your tool belt, because that's critical. I've never been in any sales training that teaches body language to salespeople, and it's the top three most critical thing you need to watch for. People just plow through their sales presentation, not even paying attention to the person in front of them who's ready to throw up because they can't listen anymore. So body language is another thing that I think I'm very good at, and I train with that, and I always concentrate on body language, and it's incredibly helpful. It's saved many sales. It's taken sales taken an appointment into a different direction than what it was going in when I noticed there was some negative body language. So I think that's important too. But knowing how to think on your feet, understanding body language, and really knowing the personality of the customer in front of you is also important.
Yeah, I think body language it's an interesting tool to understand. I've been through some sales training that talks about body language, but it was not. Let me rephrase that. It was more leadership training that talked
Right.
about body language, and it just applies readily to sales training, and like learning things like seeing the difference between closed and open and forward and back and that kind of stuff, and how you can use your body language to pull people into more positive stances and stuff like that, because like there's um, so much of the communication is happening without the words and the sounds and stuff that are happening. Most of it's with the way that you're sitting and the way that you're standing and the way that the other person is responding to you. And you can tell
Mm-hmm.
when you say things how they're responding just by like their physical, it's like the words hit them physically. And
Absolutely. Right.
yeah, and like learning to just be cognizant of that. Um, and it's something that I've spent a long time doing. Like I went to a Bible college, and learned to do preaching professionally from professionally trained preachers. And it's one of the things they taught us was a lot of body language and manipulation and stuff like that, on how to manipulate your own body language to help other people be more comfortable with you. And it's something
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten pretty natural at it, but it's a learned skill, right? It's not like an innate thing.
Right.
And it's something you can practice and get better at, and you'll definitely notice an improvement in everything, from like all the way down to like working with disciplining your children, right? Even your young kids who are not
Oh,
very communicative.
100%.
You completely change the game with I've got a 2.5-year-old right now who's I got four of them, but one of them's 2.5, and she can say a bunch of nouns, but other than that she communicates terribly. A lot of it's body language, and I
It's
tell
all
people
body
all the
language.
time.
Yeah. Even yeah. I mean, even with your pets, they're not worried about their body language, but you can tell right away, your dog or your cat, what they're feeling because of their body language.
Yeah.
And There's so many things. Like one of the things I learned in body language many years ago, which a lot of people don't realize, is that people think facial expressions are the best way to read a person, and it's actually the worst way, because a lot of people can fake their facial expressions. They can fake their smile, their eyebrows, things like that. But your feet, a person's feet, is the true indicator of what a person's feeling, because it's virtually impossible for someone to think about positioning their feet a certain way. So that is in complete contradiction. If you go to In-Home Selling 101, they will teach you have to go into the house and you have to sit Mrs. here and Mr. there, and you have to be there, and you have to take control of the situation, and you have to sit at the kitchen table, and you have to do all these things, and it's all about control. And when I learned was, you know what? Let's sit in the living room and be relaxed on the couch. And it's amazing what happens, because it's no longer a formal meeting at the table. You're sitting at the couch, you're relaxed. I can watch their feet and legs very easily at that point. And you're just in a more of a discussion rather than a sales presentation. And that is so much more successful than setting up people at a kitchen table. You know, sometimes it's difficult when you're meeting someone behind the desk, but if you get them out from behind the desk, sit in the 2 chairs or somewhere else in the office where, you know, there's not that, almost that adversarial situation. So try to get people out and exposed where you can watch them fully and feel much more comfortable, rather than, you know, the formal way that it's being trained.
Yeah, and one of the things that online, since I do most of my sales online, one of the things that I've switched to over the last couple of years is doing all of my calls instead of, like, you know, audio calls. We do video calls like this, because I don't know, the connection level, just, you know, technology allows for it, but being able to see their face and see their shoulders has been, there's so much more to it, right? Like, so one of the things that this is something I do intentionally, which probably not a lot of people would recognize on the show, but like, there's a reason I'm sitting at a 45-degree angle to the camera when I do these interviews, right? And have a forward sitting stance, because it's a positive body energy, which is something I know, versus like if I were to sit back like this, like that's more of like a negative body energy. So like there's a reason for those things, which is like, they're minor, but it makes for I think like, this situation isn't a sales situation, but it makes for a more, like you said, relaxed atmosphere. And you know, one of the things I'm going for in the show is like a whole, like, fireside chat, like we're sitting around the fire at night and just chatting about the things that we're excited about, right? And when you approach sales that way, then you're talking about problems and solutions with a friend, instead of looking at your customer as an enemy you have to conquer to get the sale, which just changes the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even those little subtle things, like positioning yourself in a way where it's a positive position, it subconsciously, it's called your limbic brain, it subconsciously makes the customer feel good about you. They don't know why. They really don't, but they just like you. Like, oh, I like this guy. I'm not sure why, and it simply could because of how you're positioning your body toward them and the energy you're sending out. If you lean back and, like, you know, cross your arms and do one of these things, now you're aloof and you're the typical salesperson who doesn't care about the customer just by doing this. Yeah. You know, I'll have a quick body language story for you. So I was at an appointment, and I was with an older couple. It was actually a rather large purchase. So I asked them at the end how they would like to pay for it, because they were thinking about financing. So the wife said, you know what, I think we're going to do the 12-month no interest plan. And I said, okay. She pointed to the area on the computer, and I looked at the husband, and he pursed his lips, kind of just went like that, very briefly. Yep, pursed his lips. And anytime you see a lip purse, it's not a good thing. It's never a good thing. So I immediately said, you know what? I need to go outside and make a phone call. Let you guys chat about what you want to do here from a payment standpoint. I'll be right back. I went outside for 5 minutes. I came back in, and he took over the conversation. He says, you know what? We're going to do the monthly payment instead of the 12 months. I said, okay, great. And he was completely much more relaxed. She was relaxed because they had time to think about it. And the sale went through. And I thought to myself, if I didn't acknowledge or recognize that lip purse, he could have absolutely went ahead with the sale because he didn't want to embarrass his wife or have a financial discussion in front of me. And then it could have been canceled the next day because he wasn't comfortable paying for the entire job in 12 months.
He would have exercised that
And it was only
3-day
because of the
right
lip
to
purse.
rescind.
Yeah, and if I didn't recognize the lip purse, I firmly believe that sale would have canceled, or they may not have even bought that night because he just was not comfortable with that program.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like one of the other things that like I do, you'll never see this, but like one of the ways that I sit on the show, like when I do these things, I actually have like my legs crossed in a relaxed position, like my ankles up on my knee kind of thing, because
Mm-hmm.
it's the way that you would sit with a friend, right? Instead of
Right.
the way that you would sit with someone, and it's like I know that my guests will never see that, right? Because this is shoulders up kind of thing, but your body language, the way
Mm-hmm.
that you're presenting yourself, the way that other people present you, like that energy comes through all the way, and it's I don't know, it's so interesting how powerful body language is when you learn to see it and recognize it, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that like one of the techniques I learned in my younger years back in my preaching days was this thing they call mirroring and matching, where
Mm-hmm.
you can adjust someone else's body language by matching them and then changing, right? Because people will
Correct.
follow your body language, right? So if you see them in a negative position, you can actually take their negative position and then move into other positions, and they'll follow you. And
Mm-hmm.
you can change the energy in a room by learning to um, sort of pay attention to that kind of body language, and learn how to move it and stuff. So I don't know, it's fascinating to me.
It really is. Body language is absolutely critical, and it should be part of every sales training, for every company. And most of the time, it's not. You have to go to like a special leadership function or something like that to have anyone even mention it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I learned it at leadership stuff. But yeah, super cool.
Hmm.
The Hero Show will be right back.
Are you tired of trying to write webinars that don't consistently convert? How would you like to have a webinar that effortlessly created sales in your online business? You can. Introducing the Webinar Alchemy Workshop. Webinar Alchemy Workshop is an online masterclass that will help you write incredibly persuasive webinars for your online courses quickly and easily. Using what you learn in this class, you can build a webinar that educates your entire audience while still creating sales. For a limited time, you can purchase this masterclass for only $7, and you'll get the exact framework I've personally used to help my clients sell more than $1 million worth of online coaching and training just over the last year. Simply text the word ALCHEMY, ALCHEMY, to 444999, and I'll send you all the details.
The music is by Purple Planet Music. Visit www.purple-planet.com.
And now, back to the show.
So, move on a little
Yeah.
bit and talk about. I want to talk about your own personal heroes, right? Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan, Robert Kiyosaki had his rich dad. Who are some of your heroes? Were they real life mentors? Were they speakers or authors? Were they peers who were just a few years ahead of you? And how important were they to what you've accomplished so far in your sales career?
Most of my heroes, I guess, would have been authors. I'm a big reader, and when I was younger, couldn't get enough of Stephen King. Loved how he wrote. Loved how he brought the reader in. Kind of modeled my fiction writing to how he wrote. I think one of my favorite books ever is his memoir on writing. It's called On Writing. He just talks about how he writes, and it's just fascinating if you're an actual writer. So writers, the business writers like Napoleon Hill, those type of guys who talked about not only motivation and success, but being positive and things like that. Those types of books always kind of hold a special place for me because there's so many sales books out there that just talk about closing, 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 and how to win the sale and how to handle objections and all these godforsaken, boring techniques that don't work and just make people even more, resistant to buying something. So the authors that kind of thought outside the box a little bit are the ones that I'm usually attracted to. I've had a few mentors over the years as well. Earlier on in my career in athletics, was a mentor that trained a lot with me, and And even that guy who owned the sunroom company, he was an old time rep, but he also thought outside the box too. And I learned some pretty good lessons with him. I remember once I went on a sales call with him when he was training me, and he did the call, and I sat there and I was like in awe. Like I thought this was the greatest appointment ever. And the people didn't buy. So we get in the car and he's driving away. He looks at me and he says, so what do you think? Do you think they're going to buy anything? I'm like, absolutely. They're calling you back tomorrow. He's like, there's 100% chance they're not buying anything. And I looked at him like, that was a great presentation. He goes, I'm just telling you, I've been doing this for 30 years. They're not calling me back. And I learned a lesson there. Like, so many sales reps think that they do a good job and did a great presentation, but you should start keeping track of all the good presentations that you didn't sell and see how many actually call you back. It's not many. So you missed something somewhere that made them not comfortable enough to purchase that when you were meeting with them. So yeah, he was a mentor of mine as well, and I learned a lot from him. So, but yeah, I would say a lot of authors and some certain people in my life.
So how important would you say having mentors has been to, you achieving what you've achieved so far?
I mean, having mentors I think it's critical. I think everyone needs to have someone that they can talk to and lean on and sort of emulate. But I think the best thing a mentor can ever do for you is to make you find your true self, who you are. You don't want to copy someone completely. You want to be who you are. And if your mentor is going to part his or her wisdom on you, and you take that wisdom and turn it into your own way of doing things, I think that's the best way to use a mentor. But you got to be open to it as well. Yeah. There's a lot of people that don't have mentors because they don't think they need.
So one of the things that I found really interesting about the whole mentor discussion is that a lot of people will find a mentor, and then what they try to do is copy the mentor and make themselves like a mini-me of the mentor, right? Of the person they're learning from. And depending on the person who's doing the teaching, sometimes they teach that way, right? Whether it be like, hey, this is what's worked for me, you should do the same thing. What I've seen is that the reality is the thing that works for them may or may not work for you. So you have to be able to back out the things that they're doing into the principles, and then apply the principles to yourself, right? In the things that make you make you tick, right? The things that make you come alive, right? And so you have to be able to back out the tactics into the principles and then apply the principles uniquely. And the best mentors know how to do that. But even if they don't, you can still learn from someone who's rock solid at what they do. And if you can learn to back out their tactics into the principles and apply the principles, that's like one of the best ways to actually make use of the mentors.
I agree. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Cool. So last question on the show is your guiding principles, right? So what are the top one or two, say, principles or actions that you use every day that contribute to your success in your business? Maybe ones that you wish you'd known when you first started out on your hero's journey.
One that I can tell you, so at the end of the book, I talk about an acronym that I came up with called ACMA. And ACMA is 4 words that kind of help you achieve what you want to do, but also kind of keep you on the right path. And the C in ACMA stands for calibrate. And what I mean by calibrate is I have on my calendar every Monday morning, it pops up on my phone. It just says calibrate. And what I mean by that is take a step back once a week, maybe even it's once every couple days. It's up to you, really. And calibrate where you're going, where you came from, what path you're on. Does everything seem like you're in the right, you're going in the right direction? You're in the car. Are you on the right path? Are you following the GPS, or did you all of a sudden did you cut down a side road and now you don't know where you are? So a lot of times, if you don't do that, if you don't kind of take a step back and look at what you've been doing and where you're going, you could go in the wrong direction for quite a long time. So for me, putting calibrate as a weekly habit that I have now really has been I couldn't live without it now, because quite often it'll pop up on my phone. I'll stop what I'm doing. I'm like, all right, this is what I did. This is where I'm going. Things look good. And I'm like, okay, great. It's a 5-minute exercise. I like the way things are going. I move on. But sometimes I'm like, wow, I should, you know what, I'm heading this way, but I really should be doing this. And what I did last, Tuesday didn't really work. So you kind of can just assess everything and fix it. It's like calibrating the weight machine to say you're lifting 25 pounds instead of 21. If you keep it at 21 and people think they're lifting 25, then they're not getting the help they need. So you got to calibrate yourself.
Yeah.
And put fix yourself and make sure you're always on the right path and that everything in you is working properly.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I use a lot.
So I really like the word calibrate, because I have it has some special meaning to me. My dad is a scientist, and the field that he is in is metrology. And a lot of people don't know what metrology is. They think he's a meteorologist, which is, someone who studies the weather or whatnot. But a metrologist is someone who calibrates things for a living, right? It's the field of weights and measures, right? So he does things, like if your speedometer says you're going 70 miles an hour, you're going 70 miles an hour, except he works in the aerospace and engineering field. So it was, if the chemical thermometer thing in the aerospace, laser thingy says it's, minus 274 degrees or 73 degrees Kelvin, that it's actually minus 273 degrees Kelvin, like that kind of stuff. And if it's off by a quarter, a tenth of a degree, everyone explodes, right? So like that kind of stuff. And I remember one day he brought me into bring your kid into work day kind of thing. And I'm sitting at his desk. I'm like 12 years old. And there's this little thing, looks like a magic wand on his desk. And I picked it up and I'm like lifting it up and down. And there's a little display on the counter that's, the numbers are going up and down as I'm like waving and lowering the wand. I'm like, this thing is super cool. Mm-hmm. I'm like raising and lowering the wand. And I'm like, what is that? He's like, it's a barometer, right? So a barometer measures atmospheric pressure. And this thing has like 6 zeros on it after the decimal point. And it's measuring atmospheric pressure to the thousandth of an inch. Wow. On the thing. And I was like, it's a barometer? And like, I knew what barometer was. Like, it's an atmospheric pressure kind of thing. And I'm waving it up and down. And he's like, yeah, it's accurate down to a 10,000th of an inch or something like that. And he's like, and you should put it down. And I was like, why? He's like, because that's a $2 million wand. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll set that down right there. But yeah, so calibration it's something like when you realize that some of the biggest, most fanciest systems in the world, they have to be calibrated on a regular basis, right? So so the airplanes, the cars, everything, like it's not something that you realize until you've had someone who's in that space. Like when my dad retired, he took a secondary job just, to fill his time, working for a beer company. And one of the things that they didn't have a calibration team. And so they had something like $800,000 a month in waste that they weren't aware of.
Wow.
That he came in because, like beer has to be done at a certain, like, I don't even know how it all works, but it was like, you have to produce enough bottles for the amount of beer that you're making. And beer only has a certain amount of time that it can be finished and before it's bottled, right? So you have to like measure all of these things. Like, we make this much beer, we need this many bottles at this amount of time in this short window, right? And because they hadn't calibrated any of those things, they didn't know how many bottles to produce for everything. They were just sort of guessing based on what's worked, and they grew so fast they didn't really have this all down. So we had to set up an entire calibration system and reduce their waste by something like $800,000 a month with calibration.
Wow.
Right? Because calibration is huge, and when companies don't realize that they need it, then they end up with big problems. So I like that you're actually taking something that it's one of those hidden science fields that not a lot of people know exist. But a lot of your biggest companies, their calibration department is a big, highly paid department, and realizing that you have to have that same kind of calibration in your own life. Or like, am I going in the right direction? Am I doing these things? Because if if you're going for a long ways, if you're off by a quarter of a degree, you'll end up in a different country, right?
Yeah, a
So,
1,000%. Yeah, I mean, in the book I write just what you said. I'm like, I start the chapter by saying, this needs to be calibrated, blah, blah, blah. All these things need to be calibrated. Even toilets need to be calibrated. But then I write, have you ever calibrated yourself?
yeah.
And it's just a simple concept, but I've never really heard of it before. And so I kind of made it into a concept of this acronym. So ACMA stands for animate, which means start,
Yeah.
start whatever you need to do, start it, calibrate, animate, calibrate, motivate, and then adulate. And the last one, adulate, is something that I don't think a lot of people do as well, is praise yourself. Stop being negative. Stop looking in the mirror and complaining about yourself or saying, oh, I look like crap. Praise yourself instead. And
Yeah.
if you do those 4 things, and you keep those 4 things in mind in anything you do, you'll become much more successful.
Yeah, I like that. I like the adulate too. That's like a $4 word for today, adulate. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the interview. I do one last thing on the show with every guest. I call it the Heroes Challenge. It's pretty simple, and it's basically this. Do you have someone in your network that you think has a good entrepreneurial story that's worthy of sharing on our show? Who is it? First names are fine. And why do you think they should come on this show?
Someone in my network that has a good entrepreneur. Yeah, actually, I do know someone. She's an amazing networker and event planner, and her name is Pam in Providence, Rhode Island. And she blows me away because I go to, you go to the networking events that are that are supposedly these organizations networking after work and things like that. And you go to them, and sometimes there's 12 people. A good one, there's 20. Pam's events routinely have 100 to 150 people on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So I don't know how she does it. So she'd probably be someone to chat with.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Those networking things, I've been to a lot of them, and you're right. Most of them have 10, 20 people. Never been to one that has 150 people at it.
I went to my first one with her 2 weeks ago, and when I called her, I said, well, how, because I was going to be a vendor with my book. And I said, how many books should I bring? I was thinking, there's going to be 20 people. She goes, well, we have 120 signed up right now. I'm like, you have 120 RSVP confirmed? She's like, yep. And that's about how many showed up that night. It's crazy.
It's awesome. Okay. So we'll definitely reach out and see if we can connect with her through you after this show. But so at this point, thank you so much for being on the show, Allan. Last question, pretty
My
easy.
pleasure.
Where can people find you if they want to, get sales coaching or sales training or pick up your book? And lastly, along with that, who would be an ideal person to reach out if they were going to reach out?
Well, obviously, sales managers have reached out to me talking about me coming in and talking to their group. Individual salespeople, I'd be happy to speak with people like that on a, I'm not going to, I'm not like a lawyer where I charge, $100 just to, call me on the phone. I'd be happy to chat with people. I enjoy doing that. But go to my website, which is www, and then it's allanger.com. So it's AL and then LANGER, allanger.com. On there, you can find, you can click on there to buy my book. It'll take you to Amazon. You can send me an email. You can schedule a consultation. Reach out to me. There's all my information is on there. So allanger.com, and I would be, also on my website, I have an offer where you can get the first 2 chapters of my book for free. You click on the link, it'll take you to a PDF where you can actually read the first 2 chapters. And if you like it, right at the end of that, you can click on there and it'll take you to Amazon to buy the entire book. So
awesome. So thank you so much for being on the show. If you're listening and you think you need help with sales training, definitely take time to reach out to Al. Again, it's Allan Langer, ALLANGER.com. I think I'm probably going to pick up a copy of your book too. I always love sales training books that are in the vein of thinking that I like. Again, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
it was a lot of fun. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it.